Well, I want to start by saying how honored I am to be doing this. I'll start by telling you how I began working with the Stephen Thomas Museum. I was hired by the city of Atlanta in 2015 to run one of their municipal art galleries called Gallery 72. They now have me running all three art galleries for the city, but that's where I started. And one of the things I have to do is take in proposals for exhibitions and guest curators. And the Stephen Thomas Museum staff visited me and asked if we could do a celebration of the life of Stephen Thomas in the city that he made home for many, many years. And I know a great idea when it comes my way, so I immediately said, yes, let's do this, and let's figure out how we can make it a citywide celebration. And we pulled it off with incredible, incredible joy. What we did was we brought about 25 artists together, and we had them respond to Stephen Thomas's work in their own style. And then we exhibited a selection of Stephen Thomas's works with those contemporary artists. And the show was a complete success. We also did walking tours around Atlanta to find the places where Stephen Thomas had left art. And that was a complete success. And then we brought the show here, and that was a beautiful success. So I think what made it successful was all the artists who came to be a part of the exhibit who were contemporary had to kind of do research on the life of Stephen Thomas. And as Don said, they found a kindred spirit. They found somebody whose art transcended culture, race, space, and time. And that's a very important thing, because often you can have artists who are very limited, very nationalistic, very small in their thinking. But that wasn't Stephen Thomas. Stephen Thomas was worldwide in his love of art, his love of creativity, and his love of people. And that made it extremely, extremely important. And so the artists who responded to him in that show responded in kind. And since that time, we've been staying in contact. I've exhibited in this space, my own work. I've curated in this space. But at the core of the entire experience was not just Stephen Thomas. And that's why we're here today. The core of it was he had a partner standing next to him. And that was his wife, Sarah Douglas Thomas. And as a husband of an artist and the father of an artist and an artist myself, I can tell you there is absolutely nothing like someone who can be your Bonnie and Clyde, you know, that person who's right next to you through thick and thin, who will uplift your legacy, whose own creativity is uplifted, and who basically has no envy of their partner. The reason we're standing in this space today is because Sarah Douglas Thomas cared for her husband and his creativity and cared for the legacy of that creativity. And as an artist, I can tell you there's absolutely nothing like having someone in your family who cares for your legacy. Because there are many artists who have lived and died, and when they've passed away, their artwork has ended up on the roadside because there was no space for it. And there was no one in their family who cared for it. I found art in the streets. And turned out these artists were famous, but nobody in their family knew. I'll give you an example. My wife and I and my daughter, we went to a house about a year ago to visit a friend, and there was a lithograph in the corner. And the person who had the lithograph said it was given as a gift, but they didn't even know it was a lithographic print. They thought it was just a reproduction poster. And she was like, "Oh, do you want this print? I'm gonna throw it away." And I said, "Oh, let me go see who it is." It was an artist by the name of John Wilson. Now, some may not know who he is, but he was a world famous African-American artist, and she had a print that there were only maybe 7 of them left in the world. So not being a person who will take advantage of someone, I let her know that that print was worth about $30,000. And you better hold on to it. But that's the importance of someone like Sarah Douglas Thomas. She made sure that her husband's legacy was going to be not only preserved, but remembered and displayed. And that's one of the most important things that an artist can ask for in their life, that somebody will be able to see their works once they're passed, once they've passed away. And so every time I walk into this space, the main thing I'm overwhelmed by, and I was talking to a couple of other artists in the room before we got up and spoke, the diversity of his creativity, the fact that he was like, I tell people he was a shapeshifter when it comes to art. He wasn't stuck in one style, one medium, one idea. He was constantly curious and constantly exploring every artistic medium that was available to him. And he did it all very well, and that's something that is also quite remarkable. When you look around the room at the works of Stephen Thomas, you can see entire histories from the 20s all the way up to the time he passed. This man contains all of art history in his being, in his creativity, in his legacy. But all along the way, who was keeping that legacy? Keeping the newspaper clippings, keeping the notes, keeping the paperwork, keeping the invoices, all that stuff that is not the sexy stuff about art and art history, but it's very important. Years ago, I went to a conference on what they call ephemera. That's when I was very young and I didn't know what ephemera was. So I went to this conference with a friend, and it turned out ephemera was paper. And there's a whole conference on paperwork, but it wasn't just paperwork, it was important paper. Like, let's say an artist had one show in his lifetime and somebody made a program of that one show, put his bio in it, put his life in it, put his works in it. And that's the only time he ever showed. Somewhere along the way, somebody thought it was important enough to keep that paperwork. And that's the only reason we know this artist lived in the world and that thing was very creative, that he was a creative. So when you look at Sarah's role in this, it was one of the most important roles there is. He had an in-house historian, an in-house archivist, and an in-house advocate. And I basically challenge all of you to think about that. If you have a creative in the family, I'm calling you out. Find time, find space, find a way to hold on to the work. And if you can't hold on to the work, find an institution that can, because that's important as well. We have various universities that love to grow their archives, love to grow their collections. And if you don't have room for it and you don't think you can keep it well, find that institution that can, because it's important. Because I honestly think there are so many artists in this region who deserve an institution just like this. I would love to see the day where we can have a shuttle go from Atlanta to the Stephen Thomas Museum to Athens and all places in between. And all along the way, you have institutions like this, showcasing the artists we may have forgotten about who have contributed to the flow of art history and to the influence of others. That's such an important thing. And another thing, I'm sure in this room we have art collectors. I want to take a moment to give a hand to all those who collect art, because you are important to this legacy as well. Those who love art, look everywhere for it. Don't just stay to the circles you know, find the places you don't know, find the people you don't know, go to group exhibitions, and I promise you, you will find joy in those places when you go seeking them. As an artist, as a curator, as an art historian, I've been lucky enough to collect all along the way. One of my favorite pieces is, my wife will tell you, one of my best friends in life is Radcliffe Bailey. A very famous artist now, but I knew him when we were in college together. And if you're smart, you know somebody has talent that's gonna go somewhere. So I had to help Radcliffe move his entire studio with a bunch of friends, and he paid everybody but me. But this was the deal. I said, you don't have to pay me. Just give me one of those old works of art you don't want. And he said, oh, okay, just go over there and look in the corner. And I pulled out this one piece and told him I wanted it. He didn't even take the time to unwrap it. It's a heavy piece too. He gave it to me, and my wife's over there laughing because I got it home, unwrapped it. I said, oh, wow, this was from his first exhibition at Fago Gallery in 1992. The tag is still on the back. The price is on the back. I don't even have to do the provenance and research for the appraiser. It's all there. A week later, Radcliffe calls me. He said, Kevin, you remember that piece you got? I said, I'm very clear about the piece I got. I remember helping you take it to the gallery when you had to display it. He said, yo, that was the first time I had ever put a photograph on a work of art of mine. I said, yeah, I know. It's a beautiful piece too. I said, so why are you calling me? He said, well, I was thinking I could, no. I said, you were thinking you could trade it out for something else? He said, yeah. I said, you know what? I can't do that for you. And I have the paperwork where you signed it over to me, but you're still my best friend. I said, one day I got a little daughter, and I'm not saying I'll sell it, but if I have to, wow, her college education is already paid for. But over the years, we've traded art as artists and friends, and I'm so thankful that he's more famous than me right now. I'll get there. But even as a curator, I've also tried to implement in the city's program, and I might have to backtrack with some of the artists I've shown in the past, like Contrapunto over here in the back, as a great arts organization. I want to set up a program where every time the city shows art, that we purchase work from those collections, because I believe that's important. During the pandemic, the city of Atlanta purchased 75 works of art from artists to support their careers. I want to make sure that's something we can do almost every 2 to 3 years if we can't do it every year. I'm not putting the city on blast, but believe me, we do what we can when we can, and that was a very important program. So for collections, that's important. To be able to build institutions is one of the most primary causes we can have when it comes to art. That's what I love most about the Stephen Thomas Museum. It is a blueprint for how to do it right. So I want to thank Lisa and Sarah and the family for the vision they had in this. And it's something I think about quite often, because there are artists when I came here to go to art school, when I came to Atlanta to go to art school in 1987 to the Atlanta College of Art, I didn't know anything in the sense of what it meant to be an artist in the professional world. But I was lucky enough to have a friend named George Dumas, who introduced me to Tina Dunkley at Clark Atlanta University's Art Gallery, who introduced me to professional artists who he knew. And suddenly I understood that being an artist was more than just about drawing the picture. There was a whole process to this, framing the artwork. I didn't know. I was a student. I didn't know. They didn't teach us in art school how to be business people when I was there. They're doing a better job of it now. But luckily, there were mentors who taught me how to be a professional artist. And once again, that brings me back to Stephen Thomas. Here was a man who came from another country in the 20s, late 20s, early 30s, who found a way to make a living as an artist in a foreign country and did it well. Did it well enough that he could support a family doing it. Did it well enough that he knew there was a professional standard he had to uphold, that he had to actually go out and hustle up jobs. And I'll use the word hustle in the best sense of the word. He didn't sit around waiting for commissions to come to him. He went and sought commissions. And because he sought those commissions and because he hustled his butt off, he created a legacy that you see around you. He was able to hold on to his spirit, his soul, his fiber, his energy, his cantankerousness, and he was still able to get great commissions and raise a family in doing that. One of the honors I've had so far in my life was to be in the documentary about his life, and think about that. to think about how important it was that this man was so committed to not only his art, but his ideals, that he could have carved that stone mountain, but he wanted to carve a new South, and they wanted to hold on to the old South. So he walked away from a commission that would have made him one of the most famous artists in the world. So let's think about that. That's a principled man. That's somebody who is committed to art, committed to people, committed to life, but most of all committed to his family. Because although he had to walk away from that commission and Stone Mountain in general, he still found a way to make incredible art. I went, like I said, I went to the Atlanta College of Art, and the first place I went to go and find a meal was at Colony Square. And one of the first public art pieces I had to walk past was that Trilon fountain. And I said, wow, this is the most beautiful, weird thing I ever, I was a young student, but I love this. I just love the way you could walk around it and see this body coming out of the forms on all sides. I said, oh, wow, I wonder who did this. At the time, I didn't even take the time to know who Stephen Thomas was. So it took years later before I even asked who did the piece. But once I found out, I started digging up about his life. And so by the time Lisa and them came to me about having a collaborative exhibit at Gallery 72, I was prepared to say yes, because I understood this legacy. I understood how important Stephen Thomas was to the history of creating the contemporary art scene in Atlanta that we enjoy today. And I've told them at the documentary film screening, nobody has ever done a documentary about the history of the art scene in the Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, and the region. And it needs to be done, because Stephen Thomas will be front and center in that larger documentary about that. We have a history from let's say, from when Atlanta was rebuilt after it burned to now, where art, everybody has talked about everything but the art, really, not fully. The contribution that the South has made to contemporary art history and its culture. And it's a story that needs to be told, from Stephen Thomas to my friend Radcliffe Bailey and to the artists who will be coming after us. It's an important story that the world needs to know, that we are an international region, we are a world-class region, and we have world-class artists. Another example of that is I'm in a group show now called The Dirty South. It's traveling the country. The New York Times voted that show one of the most important exhibitions of the past 25 years in America. There are, I think, 12 to 15 artists from this region alone in that show. It's traveled to Virginia, it's traveled to Houston, it's traveled to Denver, I think it's going to LA. But guess where it's not traveling to? And I don't think it's coming to Atlanta. There are about 10 Atlanta artists in this show. But that's why spaces like this are so important. There was a time when, as Stephen Thomas will tell you, the High Museum didn't consider the artists in the region worth showing. In order to be a good artist, you had to be from somewhere else. You had to be important from somewhere else. But he was right here. And I believe one of the biggest reasons he had a troubled relationship with the High Museum and its directors was the fact that he was like, hey, you're looking all over the world and you're looking past the talent that's right here in your face. Stephen Thomas is a living testament to what they overlooked. He's a living testament to not caring about what they overlooked, because I'm going to make my artwork anyway. And now I'm going to tell you, the High Museum has gotten a lot better since then. So I'll give them that. But regional art museums like the Stephen Thomas Museum will always be important, because there are times when the institutions have a bureaucracy that don't see their own talent right underneath their feet. And it's up to us to make sure that talent is preserved, is seen, is celebrated, and those legacies are not forgotten. And that's why I'm happy to be speaking here today. That's why I'll always be happy to speak here, because Stephen Thomas is an example that I want to live up to as an artist, as a person with principles, who cares about the world and cares about the people, and is eternally curious about his own creativity, that he pushes himself beyond his own limits to make art that will always be remembered and always be cherished. So I want to wrap it up by saying, thank you, Stephen Thomas, for being the artist and the person you were. Thank you, Sarah Douglas Thomas, for being the woman and the wife and the mother you were. But most importantly, Sarah, for being the historian and the archivist who understood that it was you who were going to keep Stephen Thomas's legacy and spirit alive for others to see. Thank you all.